Welcome to another training video from XMPRO. Today we will be looking at how to create and use data sources. As a prerequisite, you should have already gone through the video on how to create app data connections. If you haven't, I highly recommend you do that first. Let's jump in. So I have an app here, as you can see, but it is all blank. And I wanted to display some data. So the first thing I would like to do is, over here where you see page data, I would like to add some data sources. So if I click plus over there, it will give me this screen where I have to specify a name for my data source. Let's say I say it to be Furnace Health Score. Then I can choose a connection. As per the last video, we created a connection and called it Furnace Data. I will choose that, and that will bring back all the entities that connection can provide me. The entity I'm looking for is called Furnace Data. Once that part is done, I can click Save, and then that data source will be available for me to use in my page. I can reuse it as many times as I like on this page. Clicking the expand button here shows me all the columns or attributes that are being returned by that data source. Now, how do I put it on my form or on my screen? There are a couple of controls here which are actually data bound controls. For example, a chart or a grid or a drop down. These are all the controls which can be bound to a data source, and they will behave accordingly. So let's start with one control which is the easiest, and that is a data grid. I will put a data grid over there, and I will click on it, and let's say I want my furnace data to appear in this data grid. I will then go to the block properties, and you will see I have a few options here for this data grid. I'll skip the others and just go to the data source, which will then present me this screen. The first thing it asks me is which data source I want to use. So I'll use the one I just created, and then I have an option to either create a filter on it, select if I want the data to be sorted by a certain column. There are also some advanced options, but I'll leave all of them for default. I'll click Save, and when I launch it, I expect to see data in that data grid, which is coming from my data source. As you can see, it loaded that up. Now let's go back and try a few other controls and see what are the other options to present data on the screen. So let's try and put a chart in this area. So I put a chart over there, and when I click on it, I can go to its block properties, and under data source again, I'll choose the same data source, and then very quickly I'll go and add a series. Where the type will be line, or perhaps let's say bar chart. I will choose x-axis to be the asset ID and the y-axis to be health score. I'm not going to go into too much detail of this because this will be covered in the chart, how to use a chart control video on its own anyway. But once I apply and save, I can launch the app again, and my data should appear both in the chart and the grid. Now one last thing. These are the controls which know how to display the data source. They have their own way of displaying each record that they receive from your data source. A data grid knows how to display it in certain lines. Chart knows how to put it as bars. But what if I don't want to stick to how these controls represent data? I want to create something on my own. If that is the case, what you can do is you can use a control called data repeater box. I will drag it over here. Once it is dragged, it spans the whole area by default. I'm gonna give it a smaller height, for example 70 pixels. Now, what I want to do is, for each record that my data source returns, I want to define how it should look like on the screen. This data repeater box will allow me to do that by specifying what data source it should use, which will be the same one. Once I choose that and save it, this box is then going to repeat itself for every row it's going to find in that data source. And now I have the opportunity to define how each line should look that is returned from that data source. So I'll go ahead and create a bit of a template here for my data items. So in the blocks, I'll put a vertical stack layout. I'm going to quickly make it so that they look nice, and then I'm going to put a text in it, and next one I'm going to put text again. Actually I should, since I add some styles on it, I should just clone this. This is a quick tip. If you want to use your existing styles, you can just clone them and you don't have to style every box again and again. Now in the last box, let's say I want to put an indicator. Right, so I have that layout. That layout is going to repeat itself for every line that it receives from the data source. Now, but I want this text to actually display the text coming from my data source. So I can go to the block properties, and in the appearance, change this text from static to a dynamic value, and then it will give me all the options that I have in my repeater box. So I'll choose the name to be displayed over there, and for this one I will choose the health score, and for the last one I will go ahead and choose its color to be dynamically set by what is being received as status from the data source. Once I save this and launch it, I expect to see a line over here, or my repeater to repeat for every record that it finds, and you can see it is doing that. The template I created is being repeated for every record, and that's how you choose yourself how each item in your data source should be represented or displayed on the screen. So that was a video on how to use data sources and bind them to certain controls. Thank you so much.